All right, and we are live. Thank you for joining me this morning and early morning out there on the West Coast. But thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about the 2024 Channel Technology Map and Industry Report. This is a massive iteration on the 2023 technology map that we produced just about 12 months ago. But this report has a ton of interesting insights aggregated from the industry. And I think one of the main goals of this report in general and the platform in general is really to kind of share this unbiased view. It's really an unprecedented snapshot of what's actually going on in the global IT channel. We've got a very MSP heavy population, although it's pretty broad with IT service providers in general, with resellers, VARs, agents, trusted advisors. But you're going to see some really interesting some viewpoints on the map and the report that we've put out. I think there will be links to download the report here, but high level, right? There's about 7,000 users in the platform. It's about 2,000 stacks created, 35,000 products added to these stacks. And in total, we looked at just about 2.2 million pieces of data in aggregating this report. So before we jump in, I really have to give a big shout out to Nick Morgani on our team, Director of Revenue Operations. And we've spent the past 3 months really going through this data, normalizing it, and putting it in a format that we could present to the world. And without his tireless just dedication to this thing wouldn't happen. Secondly, I'd like to thank our category sponsors and our title sponsors, OpenText, Rhythms, ThreatLocker, and Kaseya. It's important to note that their sponsorship has zero impact or influence on the data that we've generated, but it did make it possible for us to bring it to you at no cost. And lastly, I'd like to also thank you, big thank you to our content sponsors, Robin Odie, Principal Analyst at Canalys, Rich Friedman over at Channel Master, and Jessica Davis of MSSP Alert, and Fred Vicola of Kaseya. You'll see that they've provided some context on the industry. All right, so now to help me analyze and discuss a very lively discussion of the 2024 technology map and report are Dave Sobel and Asher Mathew. Dave is the host of the Business of Tech podcast on MSP Radio, 10-minute daily, basically podcast. The Business of Tech delivers the latest IT services and MSP-focused news and commentary, curated stories that matter with commentary answering, why do we care? You'll see that's a big theme with Dave. Why do we care? He's a channel veteran, brings you up to speed and provides resources to go deeper with insights and analysis. I mean, it's really a lively, educational, fun podcast. You got to check that one out again, mspradio.com. And Asher Matthews is the co-founder and CEO at Partnership Leaders. It is one of, if not, it has to be the fastest growing, partnership focused community on the planet. I mean, I've seen, them start from essentially a Slack group to this massive, just industry changing, organization. And so I'm thrilled to have Asher on as well. I think when we spoke a little while ago, there were roughly around 2,000 professionals in their group now. So definitely go check out Partnership Leaders over at partnershipleaders.com. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest here, and we'll let the conversation begin. Here we go.
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. This is going to be great fun.
This is going to be great fun. Thank you, Dave and Asher. So let's just start with, I kind of gave, my spiel about what we're trying to accomplish and what we've done with this report, but you were the first two to see the report outside of a handful of us here internally. So let me just start just broadly speaking. Let me just open it up and maybe you guys pick who goes first. We didn't script this, but what were kind of the overall just thoughts of the report?
Cool. Dave's the expert, so let's have him lead us, and then I'll follow in.
Expert, nice way of saying loudmouth. I mean, I got a little bit of early access to it, and thank you, Kevin, and your team for providing that. So for me, wanted a quick run through as I went through. There were two data points that I spent a lot of time thinking about. The first was the commentary around AI fatigue. One of the data points in there is 34% of respondents to a Canalys poll reported that Microsoft Copilot was driving generative AI opportunities. But then there's also indication that there's not as many that have moved to production, and there's some real struggles with ROI. And it cited AI fatigue, and I've got thoughts on that because I'm not convinced that's the actual core issue. And then the other area that I was really focused on was this disconnect between partners and vendors around essentially their relative importance. Vendors are leaning into partner acquisition, logo acquisition, drive, and channel partners are actually looking to reduce the number of vendors that they work with, and that they are simplifying their stacks, and that they are, and so there's real value in going deeper with fewer, and that's at cross purposes. That's going to be a real source of tension, both now and over the next 2 years, that I think is going to be a real struggle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Asher, what were your expert opinions and analysis?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I look at the world from a technology and talent point of view, and this report really opened my eyes to the opportunities that exist for MSPs. One of the big things, at least from the research that Partnership Leaders does, is is really trying to understand, like, what do technology companies, and we specifically call them ISVs, like, what are they doing? How do they expand their footprint? And we spend a lot of time on the co-build side of the world. But this conversation is actually about how do we distribute that technology all around, and how do we care for the downstream partners and support them so that they can make customers successful, right? So in addition to the stuff Dave was talking about, the things that opened my eyes were just the sheer amount of talent shortage in the cybersecurity industry, and the opportunities for MSPs to actually build better services or larger engagements. And then the other thing that was super interesting for me was just the MSP business as it stands. There's a section in here where we talk about consolidation and profit margins, and MSP's been able to increase their profit margins from 10% to 30%. That's like a huge jump, and also I think it would the founders and the CEOs and the exec teams of the MSPs that are able to do this stuff should feel very proud of themselves, because that just gives them runway to build an even bigger and better company. And again, all with the intent to serve customers and make them successful. The last thing that I'll share, that I don't think it was covered in this thing, but it's going to become very hard to distinguish between what's a software company and a services company. And I feel like some MSPs are going to build products themselves if they aren't already. And so those are like my three like observations as I was going through this thing, and I got really excited about just the state of the MSP, because traditionally when you come from an ISV background, you just think of MSPs as this like agents that are out there. You put them in some metal program, and then you like just let them do what they're doing and put a couple of parties together, and they're good to go. But like this thing really opened my eyes to like understanding their business a little bit more, and how do we serve them so that they can build serve our customers better.
Yeah, well, I'd argue it's probably still all about the parties, but no, point well taken. As you can tell by the number of I think just up on our site, just under the events section, I think we had now 1,800 events on the events calendar for the next year, or over the past 12 months. And so yeah, it's there's concept of event fatigue, and there's a number of parties out there, but we'll cover that on a later episode. But so a couple of the statistics I'd like to throw out there and get your thoughts on, right? Last time we did this technology map, I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 different vendors, which represented about 711, 712, can't remember the exact number of logos, meaning that, most vendors were single product vendors, but then there are a handful that had 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, products. This year, we're at 990 vendors that have been brought into the platform, and then just under 1,200 products. So that obviously the number of vendors have grown by about 50%, and then the number of products have grown. But it goes to show just how large this marketplace is from a vendor standpoint. And I know McBain and some others, peg it at about 35,000 vendors that have channel, programs. Now, whether they all touch MSP, MSSP, or kind of that segment of the marketplace is debatable. But any thoughts on just kind of the rapid evolution of the kind of the technology landscape and just how many vendors are really out there now?
Yeah, everybody sees the money, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like let's start with the core problem, and in a way, like Asher sort of opened the door to the problem, right? There's a lot of software people that don't understand the way end customers buy. Like
Right.
just flat out, right? And particularly when you think about the vast majority of businesses are small and mid-sized organizations, and they are not going out and procuring it themselves. They're working with a technology advisor of some kind that guides them through the process. And so and we see this a lot of times with small Silicon Valley based startups that think they're going to go out and get every single B2B business out there, and then they quickly realize that that is really hard to get a lot of small businesses, and they stumble over that and they fall, and then they somehow miraculously find the managed services or IT services provider community, and they get religion, right? Like that, a tale as old as time at this point, right? And so that evolution is part of that. So they see it's much easier to get a product into market, is much faster, particularly with cloud delivery and SaaS and all of the components. And so there's a flood of, I have a widget that is going out there. And then there is now that added complexity for those IT providers to solve. That's sort of the corollary of how this is all happening. It's put a lot of pressure onto the service provider to solve those problems for customers and be both the jack of all trades and the deep specialist required in a particular vertical or a particular approach or a particular geography or whatever their qualifier is. It puts a lot of pressure layered on top the problem of lack of talent to deliver it all.
Yeah, and I think the problem will get worse, in my opinion, because you're gonna have. I mean, my 6-year-old plays with an app called Tinkerbox, and Tinkerbox allows him to create something. Next thing you know, he asks for ChatGPT, and this is a 6-year-old, right? And then after that, just pretty soon he's going to say, well, can I create my own app, right? It's coming in the next 18 months, right? So you're going to have this explosion of apps. This is why a lot of the ISVs are looking at platform models where companies integrate with each other. But once they've got all that product built out and the use cases mapped out for customers, they're going to look for distribution, right? And I think there are 30 million, round numbers or so, companies in the United States, and I believe 22 or 23 million of those are considered sole proprietorships, right? So then you're left with the 7 million companies that you want to go after, and of the 7 million, I believe 6.5 million are less than 10 million, and then there's about 13,000, somewhere about 14,000 companies that are above a billion. And so then you've got this rich mid-market, or maybe like SMB plus mid-market, like companies that are 10 million to a billion. And how do you reach those companies? And I believe the MSPs and at least the VARs traditionally were a path to that. And then the VARs who picked up services, I'm assuming, become MSPs. Like I would love to get your point of view on this, right? But then also, as channel companies or companies that have channel programs go away from margin that was paid in perpetuity. I mean, HubSpot would be, I believe, the latest company that just did that, right? They took their recurring margins into perpetuity program all away. So people have to now start creating impact over and over again to gain margin. So then in that type of world where the ISVs have pressure on building more product to serve their customers, but also being efficient, they're going to create this environment where there's lots of software, but they need the MSPs, and the MSPs are like, well, we don't have enough revenue coming in from subscriptions that we're selling, because it's a different model, but also our customers are asking us, what else can we do for them? So you've got the situation, right? And I'd love to get Dave's, like, let's say, connect in the future dots point of view on like, well, what happens like 24 months from now?
Well, I mean, so I look at this and say, like, I try and simplify the problem a little bit, and I always sort of say, like, if MSPs, IT services companies, make their most money off the services related to deployment, integration, project management, ongoing maintenance, all of the components of making that piece of software that the ISV has built actually functional for the end customer. They don't make their money on selling the license. And if you essentially mentally assume you make no money on the license,
Yeah.
right? You are not motivated by the license. You are motivated by all of the other things.
Yeah.
There is a wonderful symbiotic relationship to be had there, but they are also achieving different goals. And so the goal of selling more licenses is not the goal of the IT services company. The goal is to make the project successful and measure on the business outcome.
Yeah.
And that's the disconnect that that oftentimes happens, because you get a lot of software vendors that push for license.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that actually isn't aligning with both the customer and the IT services company's goals.
Yeah. And that's well said. And I remember, I believe Sage at some point in time, which is an ERP software provider, did business building events, and they focused on helping their partners build their businesses, right? And but if you look at the rhetoric right now in the market, even like companies like AWS are focused on security, industry, GenAI, and migrations. But nothing in there says like, hey, let me actually help you build. Now, I would debate that AWS is probably the most aggressive in helping people build their business, because they're just so fast getting into market. But I think the vendors now have a problem where they need to also pick a few MSPs or partners like that they go deeper with to help build their businesses. And ServiceNow, I think, did this where they actually started investing, and I think Snowflake does it too. They started investing into a few of their services providers. Salesforce, by the way, does this too. They have a person on the services side, the alliances and channel side, where they invest in some of their partners. So I would say, like, the next 24 months, as the blurriness between what is a software company and what's a services company takes off, that there's more investments from ISVs who produce a software into these services companies, and you get a tighter alignment in building businesses and then getting customers to outcomes.
Well, I'll agree with you, but I'll say with a smirk, the successful ones will do that.
Yeah.
I am not convinced that
all
all of them will do that.
Totally.
I'm not convinced all of them will do that because of the learning curve that I've seen so many times. But you'll identify the fast performing ones. But your comment there is very spot on, because it's the ones that invest in some understanding of their partners and the way they're going to grow them. Either generally at the mid market or upper mid market, it's done with a one-on-one relationship. And as the data in the report shows, for the at scale, you have to do that in a more one-to-many investment. So that's where we see like the rise of peer groups, Kevin. It's why the solution providers are asking to understand which peer groups are involved here, what consulting organizations are involved in my organization. They're considered part of the deployment stack because they are important in the tools to help grow the business.
Very much so. You kind of piggyback on what you guys were just discussing. One of the themes that we've seen is that there is this drive to automation. There's the drive to use AI. And one of the things that we're kind of forecasting, right, is that AI and automation in general are going to be fantastic for IT service providers in the short term, right? It's gonna help them be more efficient on the help desk. It's gonna help them with development. You're gonna gain all that efficiency. But in the long run, one of the thoughts is that automation is ultimately going to drive down margins. It's going to drive it even lower. And then you have this again couple of dynamics going on, right? You got the flood of vendors, moving to platforms, and they're leveraging, they have basically pricing as a weapon where they can acquire these technologies, create platforms, and then use pricing as a lever to drive margins down. And then, as Asher kind of alluded to, we're also seeing a flood of the agents and the resellers now moving into these recurring revenue business models, because gone are the days where you had the big hardware transaction, and you got $1 million deal here and kind of just coming through the pipeline. But so yeah, you have this convergence of automation is going to create efficiencies, but it's ultimately going to drive down margin. You get the flood of vendors coming in. There's going to be a lot of pricing, competition, and you've got just commoditization of most of these product categories, and then you got increased competition. And so you're kind of seeing these themes emerge across multiple product categories within this report. And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts if you have kind of seeing something similar, or if that kind of aligns with where you guys think the market's going as well.
So I'll throw out that I'm not a believer that automation is going to drive down margins, because we've just literally laid out that the problem that IT service providers are trying to tackle is bigger than they can, and there's a labor shortage. So when I look at those two components, I go, yeah, that's what automation will help do, is actually help fill the gaps there. I don't think it's going to drive down margins. I think it's actually going to help improve margins, because I think you're going to be in a position where you're able to run your business better, do more things, and take a lot of that commodity work or fill the gaps that your people can't necessarily cover with better automation. And I think that, in my ideal world, this is where tool providers are going to truly identify the pieces that they can automate away and make better, and help service providers focus more on the high value stuff. And that is, getting back to the core premise of what I think an IT services provider is it providing good technology advice and guidance to your customers to help them get better business outcomes. There's a lot in that statement, but the point is that you have to have a lot of customer service. You've got to focus in on understanding their business. You've got to measure the project deployment. You've got to do all of the stuff to make sure the technology is getting more revenue, higher growth, more, a better business outcome, or drive down costs. That's another area that you can improve business outcomes. And so I'm not convinced that automation is going to pressure on that. What I actually think is going to do is just help fill the gaps in. Now, I am cautious in that to say that you have to do it in a very intentional way, and you have to be very thoughtful of doing this. I alluded to, I'm not a buyer of AI fatigue. I will say that I think if you're suffering from AI fatigue, you are recognizing that marketing is bullshit. Okay, welcome aboard, everybody. This is following a very predictable trend that Gartner talks about all the time, of peak of inflated expectations, drop into the trough of disillusionment, find the plateau of productivity. Yep, we're right in there. But if you're actually taking a good look at the technology like automation, AI, you're saying, yeah, I am looking for good applications that will drive me to better outcomes. They are not easy. If they were, everyone would do them, but they're there.
Yeah,
Right.
I subscribe to the same philosophy, because it would just take two examples, right? I would imagine that the growing MSPs, number one use of time wasted is support calls. And if a lot of those support calls can, one, be self-served, or two, taken by agents, then you just take those human resources and allocate them to much higher value things. Like maybe you pick another category, like somebody who's working in backup and recovery could maybe pick up products in the marketing category, right? Or the more ambitious ones, I think, will actually go out and start doing management consulting, because the IT structure or the IT plan in a company now also needs to include the data plan, but the usability of data plan, not just the backup and recovery plan part, right? And so I feel like there's lots of opportunities, but also if we take a second to just say, well, what does the firm of the future look like? I think the firm of the future looks like a highly efficient, fast-growing lifestyle business, if I can put it that way, right? And I think that's an opportunity for transformation. And I think the people that are going to be readers of your report should actively pursue this, because then they can get there first and fast, and they can make all the mistakes without a lot of competition trying to eat their margins.
Yep. I love that. And I would tell, would completely echo it and say, lean into that. I think thinking old school consulting, business management consulting, and being able to apply those skills, particularly in that mid-market space and SMB, if you can be good at that, you're going to excel in this space. And I'll be a little contrarian here and say, like, lots of advice, like lots of people will tell you, lean into cybersecurity. And I will say, I don't buy into that theory. Because I look at, and I'll give you a lot of credit on the report here, right? So one of the things that fascinated me was the number of cybersecurity vendors, and I'll say, okay, looks like everybody's chasing the cybersecurity problem, but I'll observe to the audience of MSPs, if you build a really good incident response plan with a small number of tools and are prepared, you will crush your response versus the person that invests in 47 cybersecurity tools, all of which promise you zero. They don't promise a thing, right? And so, like, the winner in the cybersecurity battle is the first who has done the people process part, not the one that has bought a bunch of product.
Yeah,
right.
and well said, Dave.
Yeah, definitely well said. And let me just share what I believe you're referring to. Hopefully you can see my screen here. So this is a snapshot of that cybersecurity category. And so what we're seeing across the Navistack tool, right, as MSPs are coming in, I think we started in the cybersecurity space with around, when we launched Navistack this time last year, I think there was like 9 core products in the cybersecurity section of Navistack. Now we're at 47 different, products, right? And you can see generally kind of the more common products that are in this category. And then, we're taking several thousand product reviews, and these vendors have been scored. So those products have been scored. You can see how many reviews they have. But what was surprising to me in looking at this, right? To your point, Dave, is that it's having a robust incident plan. It's not necessarily what tools that you're using, right? Because a stack is a stack, it's a stack. But if you look at still the most popular tools within a MSP stack, right? I mean, it's like antivirus is still number one, right? Then you got any email security, EDR, and we've seen a really I think we might have a trend line. I think we took it out. We're gonna have a pretty exhaustive cybersecurity map come out here early 2025. But MDR, you see the early part or latter part of 23 starts out real low, and then it spikes significantly, toward this year. But any comments to your point? It's about incident response, but any comments on the core products in the stack, with the exception of EDR and MDR? I mean, it seems like it's the same stack. It may be soft, but the same stack.
I would be irresponsible in my own positioning to not mention that, okay, thousands and thousands of vendors that you've talked about here. And last I checked, the pledge list that CIS has published on Secure by Design pledge writers still fits on one web page. Right. So there is, right, like the number of vendors that have committed to the Secure by Design pledge still fits on one web page, does not need a searchable database. So like there is still some work here. And for those that, those solution providers that are thinking about that, I think that's a key question now, that you differentiate your work in cybersecurity on your vendors. You should be asking them, have you signed CIS's Secure by Design pledge? I think that's a buying criteria now. I look forward to next year when you may include that data, right, in terms of the way that that's done, because the only way this improves is the improvement of software quality. And that's the push that customers want, that MSPs should want, and IT service providers, so they're not pulling on the liability themselves. I think that'll be an important trend to watch.
No, I agree.
I'm not surprised that, and Kevin, maybe you can educate us all. There isn't like a workflow experience or workflow automation category, right? Do MSPs not work in that sector today or category today?
Well, they do. I mean, that's certainly, I think, so I tell you quite candidly, one of the challenges, right, is that we have 220 different product categories across the platform. And one of the hardest parts is normalizing all those categories and rolling them up into these 19 core categories. But they're definitely out there between, you have an element of that in IT management, you have it in operations, right? And then you have it in actually in some of the as a service categories, which are even more challenging to decipher, quite candidly, because everything now is as a service. But no, that's something as we progress, back to kind of Dave's comment, is that mapping to whether it's CIS or looking at different kind of frameworks, mapping that as an overlay of this over the next 12 months is certainly something that we've got up on the board, because it's one thing to say, all right, this is what the stack looks like. This is what the ratings are and kind of the popularity of vendors and stuff like that. But to your point, it's really what is the impact? What's the overall impact? Not just on the stack, the security posture, and then you're going to have this massive uptick in compliance, and you're seeing the uptick now in cybersecurity, and that's obviously been challenged because they had to normalize really what the risk tolerances were and kind of those actuaries or whatever. But there's some really interesting opportunities to take this core map and the report that we have, and then my fear that this thing grows into a 200-page report next year, and we're gonna have to start on it probably next month.
Hopefully it's the CPGPT. That's what it.
I posit.
Ask the question, get the answer.
Yeah, I'd posit there, just as a working theory, is that the categories where there is a little less commoditization are going to be much more difficult to track in there. So when we talk about robotic process automation tools, there's still a lot of differences between those tools and require a lot of skill of the implementer to do that. Whereas some of the tools that are easier to map, that they've Channel Program's done such a nice job with, are the ones that are a little bit more replaceable. We're not having massive debates on your EDR, MDR, XDR, like those. Yes, vendors, they are different, but at the same time, they are much more easily plug and play to replace one versus the other. Whereas a workflow management system is much, much more difficult to do in kind of plug and play work.
Yeah.
Well, look, we even saw that though, because in Navistack, we could have said, all right, the vendor identifies this product in this product category, right? And that's where you place this product. But as we started to evolve the platform, we'd have MSPs coming and say, well, I use this in, as part of my compliance program. So this might be a security awareness training, but can I put it in my compliance bucket? That way I can feel like I'm covered over there. And that, opening that up was really enlightening, because it did see, and I think Dave, you kind of mentioned this earlier, it's like you saw really clearly a couple things. One, you saw, the vendors might be marketing their technologies, their solutions one way, right? But how the MSP or how the user actually perceives that technology or that tool that they're using could be completely different than how the vendor is going to market. Largely, it was there's alignment there, maybe 70% alignment, but we did see a lot of IT service providers taking a particular product and putting it in 4 or 5 or 6 different categories, which was pretty interesting to see. Maybe that's an additional marketing opportunity, or maybe they just, again, going back to the vendor, maybe they just suck at marketing or whatever. But that definitely created some additional challenges.
1,800 events would say, the data point of 1,800 events would say that's maybe not true, but I totally get it. I guess I would just like to encourage the listeners to take some of their profits that they're generating. Well, there's 2 steps. Right? Step 1 is like figure out how to get to the 30% profit margins or somewhere close to that. And then step 2 is like take some of that and invest in building some sort of add-on product with the vendors that you prefer to work with, and start participating in their platform economy. And because what that will do, and this is my opinion right now, as I was just thinking of like, well, what would I leave this audience with? Is what that would do is it will help you actually participate in the recurring revenue streams, and then that'll just grow over time. And once you understand the gift of startup gods called MRR, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give counter. I mean, because I actually recognize very much the difference between a product business and a services business.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And IT services businesses are services businesses. And I would argue lean into what you're good at, which is people management, process management, and deliver services-based solutions. No, if you're building a product, that is an entirely different business. And 100%. It will oftentimes be very counter to your services business. So I would encourage you, and Asher alluded to this, I think it may be a dirty word sometimes, but like management consultant, business consulting services are really at a premium right now. They are really high value. There's a lot of companies that are not doing it or doing it very poorly, and lean into your ability to deliver customized advice based on methodologies and processes that you implement in a very standardized way, but lean into the ability to tailor and deliver solutions that are delivering measurable business outcomes to your customers, and lean very heavily into showing that, and you will excel in this market, because so many of the space is not doing that. One of my favorite stats that I fall back on all the time is roughly 30% of the IT services market is either break even or losing money every quarter. That is service leadership's financial reports on this consistently for as long as I have been doing this, and there's the gray hairs to show it, right? Like so that what I'm saying is, remember, 1 in 3 roughly of the people out there are losing money or break even, and so there is space to really excel by doing this thing, which I'm not saying is easy. But the more you do it, the better you will become at it, and you will leverage process to be very good at it.
Yeah. Well, look, we're up on time here. I guess any parting thoughts there, Asher, Dave? I mean, any last little bit tidbits for the audience?
I would just say, I'll go back to figure out how to generate profits, and then figure out how to invest them wisely and create additional revenue streams. That's the way to go.
No, there you go. That's always a good point to end on.
There you go. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you agreeing to participate in this and taking some time to review the report that we put out there. We got a link to the report down there, and definitely I encourage everybody to check out Dave's podcast over at MSP Radio. And if you haven't checked out Partnership Leaders, get over there as well. Again, it's fast growing. What you guys are doing in the industry and kind of the events and just the education, particularly on the vendor side, has been nothing short of amazing. So kudos to you for there. It's partnershipleaders.com, and we'll see you out there next time. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having us.